Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm the City Witch. Today's video is going to be about crafting and designing your own spells. Now I've wrote out a step-by-step guide and there's going to be 10 steps in total to follow, and each of these steps are fundamentally important to making sure your spells are successful. And then there's a little bit of advice at the end about when to not do magic and the reasons why you shouldn't do magic during those times. So let's get to it. So, step 1. The spell should be your last resort. Now, what step 1 is trying to get you to do there is think about how much you truly need your spell. And it's also making you consider all other options first before resorting to magic. So this is something that I've noticed quite a lot with younger generations. They are being encouraged to use magic for every little thing, and there's this general attitude of, well, why shouldn't you, or why can't you? Well, there's lots of reasons for that. Firstly, magic and utilising the craft can be very taxing in energy and very exhausting. So you need to be in the right mentality for it, spiritually prepared for it, and have a lot of energy for it. So by making sure that the spell is the last resort, what that's doing is it's straight away encouraging you to seek out other options and solutions to whatever the situation is that you're considering a spell for. This automatically makes you realise that there might be another solution which is less taxing on your energy and your time and means you don't have to use magic at all. And I am a little bit of a big believer in the universe actually shining more on those who don't automatically resort to magic, that they do actually choose to go out in the world and solve their own problems and work hard in their lives. If you've exhausted all other options and magic is your absolute last resort and you've gotten to the point where you've had enough and you need to use magical uses to manifest a desired result, that is completely fine, because the universe will recognise that you've worked hard and you've utilised all other options and exhausted them all before you've got to that point. So that's what step 1's about. Now I know a lot of you out there are probably thinking you just skip that one, you can't be bothered, but please don't. Please seriously think about that step, because it's going to be important, I promise. And for you to see results in your craft and actually recognise when your spells are working and that they're successful, this is part of that, because again, you're making sure that it's a last resort, and then because it's a last resort, you know you truly need the spell, which means you're going to put time and effort into making sure the spell works, because you're desperate for it to work by that point and it's necessary that it works. If, for example, you haven't bothered making sure that it's your last resort, you're going to whack together any old spell, not put the time and energy necessary into it, because you're not really going to care all that much if it works, because it's not a last resort. So therefore, there's going to be mistakes, errors, and you're going to miss things magically, which are fundamental to the spell, which then means the spell is either going to fail, work but not in the way you want, or create an outcome which was really shocking and surprising, or the worst scenario, grant you what you want but so well that it's no longer what you want, so your desire becomes your nightmare. So these are things to consider. Step 2. What do you want the spell to do? So obviously it's important to know what you want the spell to do, but there are literally hundreds and thousands of spells out there, and lots of practitioners are inventing spells all the time, some of which are really amazing spells. But you need to know first of all what you actually want the spell to do. So this is where you really need to think. So a good example of this is a client came to me not so long ago and asked for a spell for money. And when I did a consultation with him, it was revealed to me that he'd lost his job. The company had gone bankrupt and everybody had been made redundant, and he wasn't entitled to redundancy because he hadn't been with the company long enough. So therefore, he didn't have enough money to pay his bills, feed his family, and sort out his debts. So he was really panicking. So instantly, the easiest spell to do would be a fast money spell, or a generic prosperity spell. But actually, when you think about it, what he actually really needed was a job. Because if I did a prosperity or a money spell in order to get him enough money to pay his bills, which is extremely possible by the way guys, that's great. But then he's going to come back in a month's time and go, well, now I've got a new set of bills I need to pay for. and so on and so forth. So it's not actually solving his problem. So the advice given to the client by myself was, well, okay, let's fundamentally deal with your problems now, as in get you the money you need for your bills, but let's also look at getting you into work. So his ultimate choice was to cast a prosperity spell so advanced that it granted him a new job. So it presented him with a job within his neighbourhood where he didn't need to drive in order for him to get a monthly income long enough for him to get the job later on that he so desired. So a year down the line, he'd managed to work and feed and pay for bills and take care of his family, and then eventually found his dream job and moved on into that, because this was just a temporary job, and any employer would recognise that the reason you'd go for a job, even if it's a desk job or a retail job, is because you've got bills to pay and because you've got family to support. And I think that's honourable for someone to actually go through that first and foremost for their family before they actually progress into a career they want. So an employer would recognise that. So in the end, he was grateful for the spell work I did and the advice given. So the key is knowing what spell is needed and understanding the situation. So you need to look at it from all angles, consider all possibilities, and then also when you select your choice, think about how that's going to affect your life as well. Because if you're asking for fast money, as an example, sometimes that can come from unexpected locations, such as a death, so you end up with inheritance. So again, being careful about the type of spell you choose can be very important. So think that step through carefully before you go and actually proceed from that point. So step 3, write your spell or alter an old one. So what that means is you can either create your own spell from scratch, or you can find one in a spell book and you can borrow that. Now, words of advice on both. So firstly, let's look at if you are a young practitioner, you don't know how to write your own spells yet, so you've selected one in a spell book. So you think this spell is the right spell. You like the ingredients, you like the way it's laid out, you like the method, the delivery, and probably comes with some kind of incantation or chant to do. Brilliant. However, word of advice here is that the spell you're considering wasn't written for you, it wasn't designed by you, and it's been thrown out into the world in a spell book, and I'm not saying it won't work, but I'm saying it was designed for somebody else for a different purpose, and the energies involved in that are for that purpose. So the best thing you can do when you discover a spell in any spell book is to fundamentally change it. Now, the change doesn't have to be massive. It can be you reword the little incantation or chant. Could be you add some things into it and make it more extravagant. Could be that you don't like a colour correspondence used, so you alter that to a colour that you think is better for your needs. Could be that it recommends a certain day to cast on, you disagree because your research is implying a different day. Or it could be that you change some ingredients, so whether that be herbs or crystals or a candle, whatever you feel is wrong or not right with the spell, change it. And even if you haven't found anything that you think is wrong with the spell, you should still change something, because what you're doing is you're changing the recipe to your own. It's kind of like when a baker comes across a recipe and it's great, but then they perfect it and they make it their own because they put their own flair into it, their own way of baking and making whatever that is, whether it be a cake or a pie, whatever. You're the same. So it's important that you go out into the world, look for spells, yes, and when you find one you like, change it and make it your own. Become the master of your own recipes. So the other point on this is obviously crafting your own spells. So if you're advanced enough or that you feel you're ready to start creating your own spells, there's a couple of tips. So firstly, if you're going to stick to a mini chant or a mantra, this is usually 2 to 3 lines max. And usually it doesn't have to rhyme, it just needs to make sense. So it needs a beginning, a middle and an end. So the spell needs to make sense. So that's what you need to stick to. There's also obviously the idea of doing a chant. So this doesn't mean that you have to sing it or anything like that. What this means is you're creating something that's long enough that it can become a chant, makes sense kind of like the way a song does, and rolls off the tongue. So if you wanted to sing it or kind of flow with that, you can do. But again, it must have a beginning, a middle and end, and it must make sense. And then the most powerful form of spellcraft is called an incantation. So this is where a spell rhymes, and this is my favourite actually. I'm really, really good at writing incantations. I've been doing this for such a long time. So all you need to take note of here is that the rhyming, again, must make sense. It must roll off the tongue and flow. It must have a beginning and middle and end. And there's no rules with incantations and chants to how long or how many verses there can be to the spell. The spell can be as long and complicated as you want it to be, so long as it makes sense, or it can be as short and sweet as you need it to be. It is completely up to you. The other type is a petition. So if you don't know what a petition is, I will be doing a video teaching you how to write and create your own petitions in great detail. But the basic idea behind a petition is that you write your intent on a piece of paper in order for it to manifest. So there's a very specific way of doing this. With a petition, you don't just write anything. Specifically, a petition needs to be written in such a way that you've already got what you're asking for. And I know you're thinking that sounds absolutely daft, but it's not. So the universe doesn't understand time. Time is linear. So what you want to do is, rather than say, I wish, I want, I desire, I need, none of that. I have. That's what you need to think about. It's always I have. You're always saying a petition as if you have it. So in the case of the man with the money, I'd be writing statements like, let's say his name is John Doe. John Doe has the money he needs to pay his bills. John Doe has a prosperous, stable life. John Doe has the income he needs to support his family. Those are the statements you want to be writing down on the petition, and you can write as many of them as you like to fill the piece of paper. That's pretty much it. But there are rules to petitions. So you don't just write that and it's done. So there's 3 steps to a petition. So the first thing you do is write the name of the person that the spell is for, along with their birthday. And this must be written 3 times on the piece of paper specifically. So if this is for a couple, so, you know, some kind of a relationship spell, you'd have to write both partners' names with their birthdays 3 times. So effectively you end up with 6 pieces of information. The next step is, if you are attracting something, you must turn the paper clockwise. If you are pushing things out with your petition, you turn it anti-clockwise. That's very, very important, guys. So we're attracting money in the situation with the man, so you would turn it clockwise. This is where you'd write your petition using the statements that I've just said. So as if you've already got it, as if it's manifested and it's happened. So once that's written, again, turn it clockwise because we're attracting something. Then, as the magical practitioner casting the spell, you would sign your signature across that page 3 times. There's a point with the 3. The 3 is a power number. It's obviously the power of 3. It's a Holy Trinity number, and it's very powerful. And 3 is obviously the least number you need to form a coven as well. So it becomes quite an important magical number. So you must write it 3 times. If you're the person the spell is for, then obviously you'd write your name and your birthday. And then again, when you're adding the petition to a spell, depending on the method you choose later, if the spell method requires you to fold the sheet of paper, you must fold it towards you to attract, fold away to push away. That's all you need to know with the petition, guys. I will go into more detail and do a full video on it and give you lots of examples on how to do a petition, and also with the paper as well, because there's lots of stuff about the paper and type of pens to use as well, all traditional and all fairly magical points. So I will do that at a later date. But that's how you do a petition. So there's your choices. Either change and alter an old spell that you found in a spell book, or create a chant, a mantra, a petition, or an incantation of your own. But they all must make sense. That's the only thing I'd say to you there, guys. So the spell's the last resort. We've chosen the spell we need and we've wrote out our spell. The next one is obviously choosing your method of casting. So the method is quite important, and again, you need to think this step through very carefully. So don't just do it. You know, don't just flunder about and do something random at an altar or whatever. Think this through very carefully. So if I'm going to be manifesting money, I'm obviously going to want to do the method in such a way that makes sense to the spell. So if I'm going to be, say it's a petition, I've chosen to do a petition, The greatest way for me to use that petition now would either be to burn it, which will give me really fast results, because fire is a speedy element. It will be fast, but it'll be short-lived. So it's great for when you want money quickly to pay a bill, but not so good for long term. So we've agreed that we need the spell to manifest a job so the guy can continue to pay bills in the house and support his family. That's important. So we want to grow something here and attract. So attraction magic is really good for this. So I would probably, for that reason, apply attraction magic to candle magic. So I would probably use a green candle because it's the colour of prosperity, stability and growth and wealth. And then I would probably carve a sigil using that person's name. So it'd be something created to represent that person's very life essence. So that's the target. And I'd carve it on the candle because that's obviously the candle's then going to represent that person. I would charge the candle, I would anoint it and dress it. And then I would probably place the petition either underneath the candle, so as it burns down, it's actually attracting that and manifesting that. Or I would set fire to it and put it inside a cauldron. So there's a couple of examples there for you on a method. So your method is very important, and you just need to really think it through. Another possible method could be something along the lines of creating a money bowl. So a money bowl is obviously something, again, using the principle of attraction magic, where you would add things into the bowl that represent money, riches, wealth. So things like gold and silver sand, you know, copper and gold or silver coins, foreign currency, tissues that have monies printed on them, and then your petition inside, bay leaves, herbs and crystals, all things that represent money, wealth, stability. You'd pop that in and then you'd work with that on a daily basis. So if you were going to give that to your client, you'd have to ask them to add and take from it and keeping the magic active and rolling. But if it was you taking care of it, you would have to do this for the client. So that's another possible method choice. So once you've selected your method, your fifth step is then choosing your correspondences, magical tools, supplies and ingredients. So this isn't as important a step as the others, but again, you must match your correspondences and supplies and tools to your spell. So if you're choosing the candle method that I just discussed with you, you're obviously going to need a green candle. So straight away, colour and a candle. There's two correspondences. The next thing to consider then is what tools you'll need. So you're going to need a candle carver if you're going to carve a sigil. You're also going to need pen and paper to create the sigil in order for you to know what you're carving. The next thing is you're going to need oils to anoint your candle or moon water, and then you're going to need a selection of herbs to dress your candle as well. And then you might also want to sprinkle herbs around that, so you might need a dish to contain it all so it's safe and the candle can burn down without setting fire to anything. So that's also something to consider. Then you want to think about the tool to use to cast. So obviously some practitioners don't use wands or athams or any of those things, they just use the hands, so that's fine. But in the case of a practitioner that prefers working with a wand or an atham, then you want to choose which one's best. So if it was me personally, it was something that I really aggressively needed to happen quickly, I would probably choose my atham. But if it's something I wanted to subtly happen using really nice, calming, soothing energies to attract something slowly, but something that's going to be long lasting, I might use the wand. So there's lots of options and lots of ways that you can do your spell, and you just need to consider them one step at a time. Now, the only advice I give with correspondences is, again, they just need to make sense, but you can use as many or as little as you like. But I tend to say the rule of 3. So at the very least, 3 correspondences, and I wouldn't say more than 10 correspondences, you know, for any one spell. I mean, that's quite a lot of correspondences, 10. I mean, most time when I'm doing a herbal blend, it's no more than 4 or 5 herbs. When I'm actually developing my spell, I'm careful about all the colours and items I select as well. Everything should make sense, everything should have a meaning. And then when I'm thinking about the correspondences as well, I'm also thinking about my intent for them, because many of these correspondences have more than one correspondence. So the colour green, for example, isn't just for prosperity and wealth and that, it's for stability. It can also be quite a wise colour. It can be used for growth and change, development, evolution. So some of those qualities you might not want in your spell. So again, think about everything that you're including before you move on. Step 6, planning your spell using magical timing. So this is a really important step as well, and don't be tempted to skip it, because again, this is where spells fail. So you don't have to use every single magical timing out there. I'm not saying pick the correct moon phase on the right day, in the right hour, because that's just ridiculous. You'd be waiting all year to do a spell then, and sometimes that's just not, it's just not logical, and you need your spells faster. So my advice is to choose at least one type of magical timing, and then make sure that you state that quite clearly when you're doing your spell, so the energies know which you're drawing upon. So if it's the wrong moon phase, but obviously you're desperate for your spell and you need it now and you cannot wait for the moon phase, then you want to be picking at least the day with the correct energies, and then when you're casting upon that day, use that in your spell. So when you've cast your circle, you've called in your quarters, and you're in that moment, talk about calling upon the powers of the day itself. So a good day to do money magic in particular, especially for careers, is a Thursday. A Thursday is a really good day for business deals, bargains and jobs and career. So I would probably choose that day. So if I was in the wrong moon phase, but I know it's on a Thursday, it's the right day, I would then state very clearly, I call upon the powers of Thursday because, and then state the reasons. It sounds daft, but the universe then knows what you're picking on and what you're summoning into your circle and what energies you're calling upon. That's important. If it's the moon phase, just plan that out properly. So if you can wait, I always say the moon phases are best, and I do like to wait for moon phases where possible, but day energy is simpler and faster, because obviously at the most you're only waiting, 6 days for the next day to come around that you need, and that's usually doable. So moon phases are obvious, and I could go into them all here, but I'll just skip them really quickly. But obviously new moon is new beginnings and manifesting dreams and desires and hopes. As your moon is growing to full, you're attracting things into you because they're growing and being fulfilled. When you're in the full moon, virtually any spell can be done during a full moon, and there's 3 days of a full moon. So you've got 3 days of unlimited spell potential there, guys, and any spell is possible. Then when your moon is obviously shrinking and starting to go to the dark phase, that is when you're pushing and repelling things, and when it's in the dark, that is really good for bindings, banishment, anything baneful or protective. So it's up to you. So you've chosen your spell, you've got your method, you've got your correspondences, and you've chosen your magical timing. So now we're looking at location, so sacred space and where you want to cast. So this is just as important in actually choosing the method. So when you've chosen your method, sometimes those methods are going to include things like you're going to need running water, for example, and it might be something like a river. So therefore you might want to go and find a nice secluded location next to the river where you can cast, that will make it convenient, so you can cast and do what you need to do with the river and then tidy up and walk away. So that's something to consider. I myself have a magical space in my home, whole room dedicated to the craft and working for clients. So I'm lucky that I can just go in that room when I need to, and I can just get on with what I need to, and all my tools and everything I require is in there. So that's me. But if it's you and you're needing to go out and about, or you're a bit private or in the broom closet, you're going to need to think about where you want to do your spell. So if you are in the broom closet, you're probably not going to want to be seen. So doing spells might actually require you to gather up your ingredients, pop them in a bag and go somewhere else. And that somewhere else obviously needs to be magically chosen. So I would pick somewhere quite nice, aesthetically pleasing. So surrounded by nature is a good one. So often out in the woods or a field or something very secluded where not many people are going to walk by, so you can get your spell done, because you're going to need to give yourself at least an hour, I would say, to prep, set up, cast the spell properly, pack down and end the spell properly in order to move on. So give yourself at least an hour. But overall, the location is your choice, guys. It doesn't, if your spell, say for example, included the river like we was mentioning earlier, but you can't actually go to a river at that time, that's fine. Cast your spell somewhere sacred and special to you, where you've got the time and the energies feel right to you, and then you can always go to the river and do the ending part of the spell at the river itself, whether that's, you need to throw it in a body of running water and turn your back and walk away. That's fine, because that is part of the spell. You just need to state that at the point you're doing it. So, step 8, cast your spell. So you've done all the fundamental steps and you're just ready to cast. So tips with casting is obvious. Always use a circle. I am a full believer in a circle. Circles are extremely powerful and very old and predate Wicca, so please don't think they're a Wiccan thing, because they're not. Magic circles are far older than that, and Dr. John Dee, who is a massive occultist, used them on a regular basis, and there's lots of reasons why circles are important, so I would recommend that you don't skip that step if you can help it. They are important. What they do is they create a magical barrier which allows you to perform your spell within a safe zone where you know the energies are cleansed and purified, and nothing from the outside can get in and alter or affect your spell in a negative way. If you don't do that and you simply just cleanse your space, don't forget energy moves and travels, and thought and feelings do the same, and energy in the environment around you is charged with other people's energy, and that energy isn't necessarily positive, and that could come in and out of your space as you're doing a spell and alter or change it. And then again, if you're spotted, especially in a public place doing a spell, the thoughts from that other person seeing that could be quite negative, and they might be, you know, say of a different faith, and they don't like what you're doing, so they can be pretty mean about it. That energy cannot cross your threshold because you cast a circle. But if you've not bothered to do that, that energy is coming in and it's destroying your spell. So always cast a circle. Whatever you choose to call in your circle once it's been cast is completely up to you. I personally call in the quarters. So earth, air, fire and water. I always do that. It's a habit of mine. And I usually call whatever deity I want to work with. So that's not necessarily the god and goddess. Sometimes that's my personal goddess, which is Hecate. Sometimes it's other beings or entities I work with. Sometimes I call in the dragons, or I've got certain animal guardians. I work heavily with wolf magic as well, so I often summon the wolves into my circle. There's all sorts of different energies I might want to work with. But whatever you choose, just make sure it actually is good for your spell. So going back to the example of the man that needs money, if you don't want to summon in all of the elements because you don't feel they're necessary, think about the elements that might actually be good for this spell. So earth is a great one. Earth obviously represents wealth, stability, prosperity and growth. So straight away, perfect correspondences for your spell. So at the very least, you might want to summon in earth, or maybe Mother Gaia, because she is the earth, and summon her power from underneath because you obviously stood on her. So again, just think about what you want to summon. But if you don't want to summon in all four elements, picking one is completely fine. It's not going to imbalance your circle at all. Another point I want to make as well, the word circle is just a general term for actually casting a protective barrier around you. It doesn't actually have to be shaped like a circle. You could do a triangle, a square, a pentagram. There's lots of shapes you could choose, so long as you do it big enough for you to move around and do what you need to in the actual centre, that's fine. And again, research the shapes and what they represent and what you want to use to manifest your desires. So triangles are really good for manifestation, and they're really good for summoning and calling and attracting energies as well. The circle itself is an all-round because it represents obviously the energy of life, death, rebirth, and obviously that recycled energy, so it's all this loop of energy. So that's a really good all-round one if you're not sure about the others. Pentagram is obviously protective and really good for when you want to use sigils and traps and work against repelling energies. So again, just think about what you want to do really, guys. So then when you've done your circle, you've called in your quarters, you set up your space, you prep everything, and you just go through everything step by step, and you cast your spell. Once you've cast your spell and you're at the point of completion, you need to give yourself time within that space to help manifest your spell and your desire. So this is where you need to manifest what you want through meditation and visualization. So this is important, and again, don't skip this step. During the actual spell casting, manifestation is important. So sit and meditate. So this doesn't have to be where you close your eyes and you go off for hours and hours in your own space. That's not necessary. But staring at your altar, and often I like to touch my altar when I do this because I'm imbuing it with my intent and my thoughts, and I concentrate on what it is that I'm asking for. And again, if I've wrote out a petition, sometimes I'll write it twice because I like to repeat it as I'm actually pushing energy into the altar and the space and requesting something to happen. And by repeating the petition, I'm always reaffirming what I'm trying to say and what I'm doing. So again, personal choice. Then at that point, you would obviously close down everything and you'd start to pack up. Now, at that point, you're going to get to step 9, which is spell remains and disposal. So you need to think carefully about your spell remains and disposal. So in the case of the man who's after a job, you might want to think about what's the best course of action. Now, I've had people come to me from all over the world messaging me and saying, why are your spells successful? I've done X amount of spells and they don't work. And when I'm asking them to describe the spells in more detail or how they've done them, they always tell me at the end when I say, oh, what did you do with the spell at the end then? When have you done it? And it's amazing how many practitioners tell me, well, I just chucked it in the bin. Well, that's not very good, is it? You know, in the sense of one girl who recently contacted me, she was trying to rekindle a romance between her and her ex and spark back that passion and desire for each other. So she'd done a spell, but then she'd went and whacked it in the trash. And I went, what does that say about your relationship with this person? It's in the trash. Hello? So that's not really great, is it? So I'm sorry, but think about what you want to do with your spell. If you are banishing something, sending it as far away from you as possible. So you're not going to bury it in your property, because then you're burying all that baneful, horrible energy on your property. So no. You can bury it somewhere else. You could choose to go out and take a bus miles and miles away and bury it in a field somewhere. That's fine. You could choose to throw it in running water, and that will take it far away from you. You could, if it's baneful magic, put that in the trash, as long as you know it's trash day the next day and the bin men are going to take it away and it's not going to sit on your property. If it's trash day, the bin's already been emptied and you put it in that, it's going to sit there for 7 days. And obviously this is energy that you're trying to get rid of, so not great. So in the case of the man who obviously wants a job, what I would recommend in that moment is I would be looking to probably bury it. Now, I know you're all probably thinking, why on earth would you do that? But again, think about the elements. Earth. Earth is prosperity, wealth, stability. It's all the energies that we know is good for this spell. So the reason earth is good is because it will grow and nurture your spell. So there's a couple of ways you could do this. One of my favourite ways is to get myself a cute little plant or a little cactus, something easy to take care of. And I will put the remains of that spell in the bottom of the pot. Then I'll fill it with a bit of soil, plant the plant, fill it, make it look all beautiful, and give it to my client. Now, the reason I do that is because they are nurturing and growing their own career and their own prosperity. And if they let the plant die, then they're letting their own prosperity die. You're not responsible for that. But you could then choose, if it was something to do with you, for you to grow and nurture that. So all around my home, you'll often see plant pots, and actually I gift them to a lot of people because there's spells inside them. And what I'm doing is I'm actually trying to help their lives and help them grow prosperity and stability and wealth. And all they're doing is really taking care of plants. So it's great loving energy, and it's a great way to grow prosperity in people's lives. So if you can't do that though, and people would think that's really unusual for you, out of character to grow plants, then think about burying the property, the spell on your property. So in the case of if you've got a little yard like I do, you can go outside, find yourself a plant pot and bury it in that and leave it outside. And when you do that, tell the earth what you want it to do, because obviously the earth does two things. It grows things but also rots things. So you want to pick the energy. So this is why it's important to tell things what they're doing. So when I bury something in the earth, I will rest my hands on top of that space and I will command the earth, and I will say, earth elements, I'm requesting that you grow this spell so it's prosperous. And then just walk away. Just say, blessed be, and walk away. Or as I will it, so shall it be. Whatever you want to say is fine. Just come up with a little something. It doesn't have to be amazing, doesn't have to be another spell. It just has to be something where your intent is active and you're telling the element what you want it to do. If it's in the case of you want to destroy something, such as a curse or a hex, and you put it in the earth, then tell the earth, I want you to rot and destroy this for me. Get rid of it, it's baneful. Again, two energies, but for the same element. So you're just telling it. Same can be said of fire. So obviously, if you're using the flame, the element of fire, rather than the main candle itself, and you're working with the elements, then you can do that in two ways as well. You can set fire to something to destroy it and remove it in order to make way for something new. And again, because fire's quick, that's going to happen quite quickly. Or you can set fire to something in a soothing, burning ritual. And that means you actually, usually this is done for when you want to get rid of a trait about yourself. So something like an addiction or a bad habit, and you're purging yourself of it. And fire, again, is good for that. Water is another good element for career paths, because it's got a correspondence of devotion to it and commitment, and obviously that's something employers want. So sometimes it's a really good idea to incorporate water in prosperity spells, even though you might not consider that. And again, the air element is all about speech, knowledge, communication, wisdom. So it's the element of the mind and the mentality. So you might want to use that in order to create some kind of a charm to make your interviews successful. So there's all sorts of ways to develop your spell into more things. So that's something to think about, guys. But however you dispose of your spells, it should just make sense to what you're doing and the spell you're casting. So please don't just chuck it in the bin, because all you're doing there is you're just not even thinking about the spell itself, and what you're saying about that energy is it's worthless, it's rubbish, and you're chucking it in the trash with the rubbish. So that's not going to do anyone any favours, and it's certainly not going to make the spell work or successful. So that step's important as well. And then obviously the last step, step 10, is the aftermath. So recording your results and making alterations as necessary. So this is where your Book of Shadows comes into play. So once you've gone through all of this, you will have made lots of scrappy notes everywhere. My advice is to write this up neat, and it doesn't have to be in your main Book of Shadows. It could be in some kind of a journal. And then you can wait for the results to manifest and then actually make notes on how they manifested and tweak the spell as needed. I don't actually write any spells in my main Book of Shadows unless they were truly successful, I saw fantastic results, and I was over the moon with what happened. And over the years, because I've been at this for 27 years now, actually for me, I've got that many spells that I know are successful that half the time I don't even need to rewrite a spell or create something new. It's rare that someone challenges me with a spell I don't have. So I usually just go to my Book of Shadows and I'll go, yeah, that's the one. I know what that's going to do, and I'll just do it. And the method of the way I cast my spells isn't always the same. So how I create my Book of Shadows is I literally just have the incantation or the mantra, and then I might have, it's always in a section as well. So because we're talking about prosperity as an overall, I will have an entire section in my Book of Shadows dedicated to prosperity, wealth, career, business. And page 1 to that section is all the correspondences I could consider. It's not telling me to use them for any one spell after that. What it's doing is it's giving me all possibilities, and then I flip the page and I've got all my incantations. And sometimes I've got symbols and sigils that I've used as well, and I write out what that sigil is for. And then if I think it matches the spell I'm doing, I might incorporate that as well. So there you go. So, and that's really it when it comes to the steps, guys. As long as you follow all those steps, you're not going to have any problems with your spells whatsoever. They are all going to be successful, I promise. Just think about your steps carefully. Think about how you're designing your spell and do it in such a way that it does actually make sense. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about is obviously when to avoid magic. So there's a couple of things here that are quite important. So firstly for me, it's Mercury retrograde. So this is quite important. Mercury retrograde, when it happens, only really lasts for, I'd probably say between, I don't know actually, it's not long, it's usually kind of short period of time, but when it does happen, magic during that time is ill-advisable because the energies of the universe is all wonky. Any astrologer will tell you that, and actually any planet that goes into retrograde you should sort of be a little bit wary of doing magic under. Personally, I would probably avoid it. Venus in retrograde, for example, has a tendency to destroy relationships and marriages, so you don't want to be casting love spells during that time and destroy all your chances and something else go horribly wrong. So it's just a bit of a thought. So stay away from Mercury retrograde and try not to cast spells during that time if you can. The other time to avoid spell casting is moon void, of course. Now this is something that magical practitioners really don't know a lot about, but the moon travels through all of the astrological signs, so all of the star signs. But as it travels from one to another, there's usually a gap. Now that can range from 1 minute to 24 hours. And when it's transferring, there's avoidance of energy where the energy is mutating from one to the other, and that energy is something you want to definitely avoid. I mean, I've seen some horrific results with that energy. So If you don't understand this and you're thinking, how on earth am I going to know that? Get yourself an app. There are some great apps these days on Apple and Android for the moon, and a lot of them are free as well. So just put in moon phases and you'll get yourself a really good app with moon calendars on that teach you when there's planets coming in retrograde, when there's eclipses, whether that be sun or moon, and it will tell you all that information, and you're able to map it out then, and you can clearly see when the moon is shifting between its cycles, because it'll tell you. And then when it's between, just don't cast a spell. That's my advice, because if you do, quite often it kind of has disruptive spell like results, or it just doesn't happen at all. But the worst case scenario is definitely it happens, but it's disrupted and the result isn't great, guys, honestly. So there are definitely a couple of times to avoid magic. Another time to avoid magic is if you're really poorly, because any magic performed when you're sick isn't going to be great, because your energy is infected with some kind of virus, first of all. The next thing is your energy levels are already really low and your body's working overtime to heal itself. So casting any magic or any spells during that time is ill-advisable, because you're infected with something. So any magic you do is also going to become infected and altered in some way. You can, however, perform magic on yourself, as in healing magic. So you can obviously draw a sigil, which won't take much effort at all, activate it using a crystal rather than your own energy, place a jar of water on top of it, and then you could drink that water afterwards, and knowing it's imbued with all that healing energy of the sigil, you can obviously tell a crystal that's good for healing what you want it to do. Please purge me of this virus, and wear that. You can sleep with crystals around you. You can burn incense like lemongrass, which is good for getting rid of colds. You can do hot facial steams using various herbs and oils. There's all sorts of ways to use magic which doesn't need, massive elaborate rituals. You can do subtle magic. So those kinds of things are okay when you're ill, but if you're going to be casting spells for other people, especially if they're elaborate rituals and things like, love, money or success and all that kind of thing, not a good idea when you're poorly, so just avoid it and wait till you're better and then plan the next magical time that's good for the spell. That's my advice. So that's all I've got for you today, guys, and I'm sorry the video is 40 minutes long, but obviously the steps are quite long, so I just wanted to get through it all as quick as I could for you. If you have any questions about spell casting and crafting, then please let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, and you'll get notifications for all my next videos. And if you enjoyed it, give me that thumbs up. It lets me know that you did enjoy it. And thank you for watching all the way to the end, guys. I'm the City Witch. Bye for now. Be good to each other. Bless be.